Okay. Okay, I'm not sure about a history lesson, but and nor am I a scholar, so I always put that out there to start off with. What I am is a community leader, someone who's worked diligently in the community, uh, not only for Black America, but for this nation as a whole. So, and I tell people all the time, Black history is American history, so it's all the same history. So, I think today we're just going to talk a little bit about Kansas City. We're going to talk a little bit about what I know about Kansas City. There's so many prolific speakers in Kansas City, and we're going to talk. We're going to talk about a couple of them today, who are all friends and people who I've had the pleasure of having a relationship with. And so I don't know where you guys are from, if everybody's from Kansas City. I'm a very interactive speaker. I wish we'd have been able to do this in person because for me, I enjoy seeing people. I enjoy getting the feel of people. And, Zoom is great, but there's nothing better than having people standing next to you or talking next to you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Kansas City, some of the things I know about Kansas City, and some of the people who I've had a chance to know, work with, and do business with in Kansas City. And when I think about Kansas City, there's several people who come to my mind. First one is our United States Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. Always comes to my mind when you talk about history, from becoming a mayor to becoming a United States Congressman to having a boulevard named after him and so many other things named after him. The next person who comes to my mind and we're going to talk about is Ollie Gates. And I'm not sure if you guys are all from Kansas City. If not, but I'd like to think if you are from Kansas City, you definitely know the name, Gates and Sons and Gates Barbecue, and if nothing else, Ollie Gates is famous for making that barbecue one of the most famous barbecues and recognized barbecues in the world. And so we're going to talk just a little bit about Mr. Gates. I was with him last night for a while. We talked a little bit. He is a friend. He's someone who I always get a history lesson from about Kansas City. And he always tells me, hey, Dwayne, you ain't done nothing yet. And I say, are you absolutely correct? Compared to your history and compared to what you know, very few of us have done anything. Ollie's in his 90s and he's still in his restaurant every day of the week. So let's start off talking a little bit about the Gates barbecue saga. Began back in 1946 when George W. Gates, the father, decided that he no longer really wanted to participate or work for a railroad. And he thought the best thing to do would be start a family-owned business. And that family-owned business, the first name of that business became Kentucky. It became Gates OL Kentucky. It was located at 19th and Vaughn, which is something that's really unique because right there off of Vaughn, there was something else that was very unique there, and it was a baseball stadium. And so these are all things that become, when you go from Brooklyn all the way over to that area, these are areas that was the Mecca of what we consider to be Black business and, Black business for the Mecca throughout the country. Everybody knew of this area called 18th and Vaughn. The funny thing about 18th and Vaughn is that people know of it as going to Kansas City. People know of it as being, one of the greatest areas for African-American businesses in the country at that time. But they also don't realize that a lot of what participated on 18th and Vine really came from 12th and Vine. So 12th Street was also the Mecca of jazz as well. That's the reason why we have a jazz piano park right there on the corner of 12th and Purcell. If you guys have never seen that, or if you've driven by the corner of 12th and Purcell, there is a park that's right there. And if you're in a plane or a helicopter, you can see from the top of it that it's actually a piano park design. And that was designed that way by Ollie Gates. When Ollie Gates was on the Park and Recreation, he chaired the board of that. So let's talk a little bit about barbecue in Kansas City. And I said it's usually an interactive speech, but because I really want to know, do you guys know really the thing about barbecue and what made Kansas City so famous for barbecue? And really one of it, I wish I could see somebody's hands and say, I know, but since I can't see you, I'll just kind of give you just a little history of Kansas City barbecue. The Gates family was not the first to invent barbecue in Kansas City, but it was the family who actually kept barbecue really alive in Kansas City. And part of that was, at that point in time, we're going to talk about something a little bit later called the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and the Negro League Baseball. But one of the things that really made baseball and barbecue synonymous with Kansas City was, we had the Kansas City Monarchs here and we had the Negro Leagues baseball here. And so one of the things that would happen is when they opened up the restaurant, they would let the aroma go all through the community. And so when the baseball park was right down the street from it, obviously people were smelling this thing called barbecue. Barbecue was really cheap at that time. That was basically the burnt ends. It was basically the meat that really no one else really wanted. So what they would do is they would somehow, we might call it bribe, we might call it incentive. They would actually go and they would give the radio announcers these sandwiches, and they would say, hey, just great meat. And as a result of that, the radio personality would talk about this thing called barbecue. And they would talk about Kansas City barbecue, and they would talk about Gates barbecue. And so that's how this legend actually got really going with barbecue and baseball. It's something that I believe that most people don't know the history behind it, but yet and still, it was something that the Gates family brought to the frontier of Kansas City. One of the things about 1956, it was a decisive year for the Gates family, because the name at that point went from Kentucky O.L. Gates to Gates and Sons Barbecue. And that was simply because at that point in time, Ollie Gates got more involved in the restaurant with his father. And so the father decided to name the restaurant Gates and Sons because his son was now working in the restaurant. And so as a result of that, the name got changed. But while he was doing that, Ollie was in school, and he went on to, have a very successful career in college. And then he went on to the military. And then when he came back, he started another business. It was called at that point at 31st in Indiana, it was called OG's. And OG's was a restaurant and a nightclub and an entertainment. And so that was a very successful venture, and it went on for a number of years. But once you're in barbecue, I guess you just can't do anything other than barbecue. And so what he did is he came back to the family and started working at Gates Restaurant. And as a result of that, they transformed this thing of what we call barbecue into something that was legendary. And that as a result of that, in 1972, the restaurants really started to branch out. In 1970, they branched out. 1972, they branched out to Overland Park, which really was, at that point, it was called Leawood, Kansas in 1972. Gates and Sons is known for a famous slogan. Anybody on the phone know what that slogan is? Hi, may I help you? If you ever go to Gates, that's the first thing you're going to hear. Hi, may I help you? And the next one is take a tray, because that became their trademark. Barbecue wasn't just enough for Ollie Gates. He went ahead and created the sauce, and he put the sauce in grocery stores. I know there was a point in time when most stores didn't think barbecue sauce would sell, but it became something that they sold locally. Then they went to a regional, and now the sauce is sold all over the country and all over the world. What an entrepreneur, what someone that Kansas City can be extremely proud of, who has created this saga that's lasted for 75 years. Last year, they celebrated their 75th year in this field called barbecue, world-renowned barbecue, Kansas City Royal Barbecue. Ollie Gates is not only a legend in the business, but he's a legend in barbecue. And many people don't know that he served as Park and Recreation Board president for a number of years. There's a lot of things that got done under his leadership while he was at the parks. The zoo was redone. The World War Museum here in Kansas City was redone under his leadership. Ollie Gates may have not invented barbecue in Kansas City or invented barbecue in the world, but he is that driving factor that made barbecue synonymous all over the world. I travel a lot of times to Asia and to China, and I'm there and people find out I'm from Kansas City, and they say, Gates Barbecue, Negro League Baseball, because those are things that are synonymous with Kansas City, American jazz. Those are things that Kansas City and people all over the world know about Kansas City. So I just wanted to pay homage to someone who I call a friend. He's a very dear individual to me. If there was any one individual that I would aspire to be like and live my life like, it would be that of a man named Ollie Gates. And so I just wanted to bring you just a little history about Gates and Sons Barbecue and Ollie Gates, who was a tremendous friend. I do know in 2021, Ollie Gates was given something, a very prestigious award. And that very prestigious award is he was inducted into the American Royal Barbecue Hall of Fame. What an incredible honor for the guy we call the strutting man. You see the strutting man on top of every restaurant, in front of his restaurants. You'll see him in a tuxedo with a strut. There's no one in Kansas City like Ollie Gates, and we pay homage to Ollie Gates today for what he has done, not only for Kansas City, but what he has done throughout the rest of the world to serve as an ambassador with his barbecue. Every president comes to his restaurant and eats barbecue because it's world renowned. So, Mr. Gates, we salute you in our Black History thoughts and our Black History conversation this morning. And so I want to thank you guys for allowing me to talk a little bit about that. The next favorite topic of mine that we're going to discuss, it's something that I think all of Kansas City should be proud of. And that is the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City. A lot of the conversation we're going to be having today is going to center around the Black Mecca of Kansas City, which was known as 18th and Vine in the Vine district. So that's some of the things that we're going to touch on today, some of the things that are in that district. But there's nothing more famous around the world other than barbecue and the Negro Leagues Baseball. You know, Negro Leagues Baseball was started here in Kansas City. I don't know if many of you guys know it but Andrew Root Foster, back in 1920, came together and they started the Negro League Baseball here in Kansas City. Negro League Baseball was originally started, the contracts were signed here in Kansas City. If you don't know where that was located at, in Kansas City at this time, you know, most of the Blacks lived in a geographical area and didn't live outside of that area. Well, in 18th and Vine, you had every type of business that you could think of, from tailors to lawyers to doctors to dentists to restaurants, ice cream parlors, you know, shoe shine people. That's where the Mecca business was of Kansas City. So at the corner of 18th and Paseo, between 18th and 19th and Paseo, there's a building there, and it's called the old YMCA. That was the actual place where African Americans used to swim, to do other things. That was really the only location that we had available to us during that time. And so at that famous museum that sits right there on the corner now, the Buck O'Neill Learning Institute, was the old YMCA. And that's where the contract was signed to start this thing called the Negro Leagues Baseball right here in Kansas City, which was so incredible because we're going to talk about the financials of that and what made the Negro Leagues Baseball so important to the rest of the country and to Major League Baseball. And so let's talk a little bit about the Negro Leagues Baseball. You can't talk about the Negro Leagues Baseball without talking about one individual, and that individual is Buck O'Neill himself. I believe out of the 3 or 4 people who I consider to be the greatest individuals to ever live, I believe Buck O'Neill was one of those individuals who perhaps is one of the greatest individuals to ever live here on this planet. What an incredible individual. To his friends, to people who knew him, most people called him Buck O'Neill. But Satchel Paige had a nickname for Buck, and most of his friends knew what that nickname was. It's an interesting story. I won't go in and tell you about the story, but the interesting piece of the story is Satchel Paige gave him a nickname, and that nickname was called Nancy, Nancy, Nancy. And that's what his friends sometimes would call him, Nancy. And he adored it, and he loved the name. He loved the name Nancy because that was an endearment from his dear friend Satchel Paige. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. I don't know if you guys have been to it or not, but if you haven't, and those that are around the country that may be here on this line with us now, the Negro Leagues Baseball is something to behold. It's something to see. It's something that no one else in the world has anything like this. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum is something in the district that brings tourism from all over the country. Major League Baseball players are here. Teams are here. When they come to Kansas City, you'll see their buses pull up. They'll get off their buses and they'll go in and they'll get a tour by someone who I call my friend Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball, one of the other greatest individuals that I've met. no one knows the history like Bob Kendrick does. So let's talk a little bit about the Negro Leagues Baseball. It's a privately funded museum dedicated to preserving the history of the Negro Leagues Baseball in America. It was formed in 1990 in Kansas City, Missouri, the historical 18th and Vine District, a hub for African-American culture and activity in Kansas City. During the first half of the 20th century, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum shared its building with the American Jazz Museum, which it still does, because in the new building, half of it is American Jazz Museum, and the other half is the Negro Leagues Baseball. In 1990, there was a group formed that really got this thing really kicked off. That group was Alfred Shredder, Buck O'Neill, Larry Lester, Philip S. Dixon, and Horace Peterson. You're going to hear the name Horace Peterson a lot today because Horace Peterson was one of those visionary individuals who thought about, why come 18th and Vine can't be great again? Why come we can't have the history of 18th and Vine back in the area? Why come we can't have the Black Archives and Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, all these things back center front in the 18th and Vine district? So as we move forward, they moved out of the office, which was once held in the Lincoln Historical Building, 18th and Vine, at about 2,000 square feet until 1994. They moved 3 years later, 1997, relocated the museum again, which gave them about 10,000 square feet. And that is in the structure which the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum now presides in, which is right there between 18th and Vine and between Woodland. So those are the areas that are considered to be the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. I'll put a plug in for them. During the month of February, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum is free to anyone who wants to come in it. So if you go in it, make sure you ask for a tour, get a chance to say, hey, I heard about this guy named Bob Kendrick. Could you ask him to give me a personal tour? I know Bob can't give everyone, but he is one of the most incredible individuals to talk about Negro Leagues Baseball. Bob Kendrick came back to the Negro Leagues Baseball in 2008 when the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum was almost under collapsing. He came back around, he turned it around. Years later, he had a surplus of $300,000+ in it when it was going bankrupt. And it's individuals like Bob Kendrick who had a chance to not only be a friend with Buck and travel all over the world with Buck, but he kept Negro Leagues Baseball in front of not only us, but kept it in front of the Major Leagues Baseball. And as a result of that, they started receiving funding from American baseball and from other areas because it's truly a treasure. A little history about Negro Leagues Baseball. You know, how many of you guys enjoy watching night baseball and ever go to a night game? Well, you know, you would say, yeah, that's great. But in the American League Baseball, it was not started there. You know, night baseball was started actually in Negro Leagues Baseball when cars would come up with their lights and they'd have generators and they'd have games going in the evening because they had to play in stadiums after Major League Baseball was done. And so they did those things. And so as a result of that, it became extremely popular to watch baseball at night. And as a result of that, Major League Baseball caught on, and they said, hey, we got people that are coming out to watching games at night. You know, why come we don't start having games at night? So a quick thing is that it was started in the Negro Leagues. You know, one of the things that most people don't know. Another thing about Negro Leagues Baseball, most people don't know, they had women playing in the Negro Leagues Baseball. When you take a history through the museum will give you so many different pieces of the history of Kansas City and the history of Negro Leagues Baseball. I would dare say the Monarchs, who was probably one of the most famous teams in Negro Leagues Baseball history, won more championships than any other team that's ever been in the history of Kansas City. If I believe correctly, they won about 12 championships, 12. And so as a result of that, we know that our dear Kansas City Chiefs are getting a chance now to hopefully win their third championship. The Royals have a few championships, but could you imagine having 11 championships, 11 to 12 championships? That's what the Negro Leagues brought to Kansas City. So those are things that we want to talk about the Negro Leagues Baseball. Obviously, we had one famous player, and all the players in the Negro Leagues were famous, but the world knows him as number 42. And that's Jackie Robinson. Well, Jackie Robinson once played for the Monarchs. And I hear people saying, well, Jackie Robinson was perhaps the greatest baseball player in Major League history. And to be honest, Jackie Robinson was a great player. he wasn't the greatest player to play in the Negro Leagues baseball. He was a great player, but he had that right disposition to disposition into Major League Baseball. There were so many great players in the Negro Leagues baseball. We had several of them here. We had, Satchel Paige, who didn't get into. Some people say he didn't get into Major League. Say he was almost a senior. So we had some really great players that come out of the Monarchs into not only into the Negro Leagues baseball, but into Major League Baseball. As a result of that, though, like everything else, becomes economics. When you have a league that's so successful as the Negro Leagues baseball was, at that point, someone is going to come calling because they want those dollars as well. So, the integration piece was a big part of it. But the other part was it from the financial standpoint, that the dollars were important, that the African-American community was pulling into Negro Leagues baseball. But not only that, the Europeans that were watching Negro Leagues baseball were pulling in dollars as well. So as a result of that, they knew at some point they had to figure out how to combine some of that league and take some of those players out of the Negro Leagues and bring them into Major League Baseball. As a result of that happening, you started to see the deterioration and the decline of the Negro Leagues baseball, simply because they were going into the American Baseball League and they were going into the National Baseball League. And so as a result of that, that became the demise of the Negro Leagues baseball. What a shame that happened, but it also showed everyone that the same baseball players that played in the Negro Leagues baseball were more than capable of playing in the Major Leagues baseball. And that's one of the things that was always the question. These guys are African-American, they're Black. Can they play in Major League Baseball? And the sentiment of that was, at that particular time, the answer, they could not. But that was because the world had not really fully saw the Negro League baseball teams. And as a result of that, once they saw that, they decided these are some of the greatest players and some of the best shows that we've ever seen. We want to integrate them into the National Baseball League. But once again, a lot of it was done off of financials, and a lot of it was done simply because it had a chance to now solidify the National Baseball League as the greatest league out there, because they brought in players from the, I want to say it, I really want to say it, but they brought in players from the Negro Leagues baseball, knowing that it was going to deteriorate the league. So that's a little history on that. If you get a chance, please go down to 18th and Vine, go down to see the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, go down and see the Jazz Museum as well, because these are things that will enlighten you and give you a lot of history about Kansas City. I believe that Kansas City is the greatest city in America. I truly believe that. I live here. Without a question, I could probably live any place that I wanted to live in the country, in the world. But I choose to call Kansas City my home simply because of its rich history. We talk about that. We talk about the Black Archives, which another name you heard earlier, Horace Peterson, who started the Black Archives, who could not see the Black history of Kansas City or Black history throughout this region going uncategorized. So he wanted to make sure that we had that history stored away somewhere that we could tell the story. And at the beginning of my speech, I shared with you that Black history is American history. I know we focus more on it in February, which is the shortest month of the year, 28 days. But Black history is something that we celebrate 365 days of the year. Black history is something that should be celebrated every day by every human being, because we have given so much back to this country and created so much for this country. I had the pleasure of being at the inauguration for Barack Hussein Obama. And I sat there and I thought about the inauguration. I thought about the house that the first Black president of the United States would move into. And I thought about those slaves who built that house. Could they ever have imagined that if someday we'd have an African-American president to live in a house that they built? I think that's an incredible vision. I'm not sure if they had that vision, but I would imagine that somebody that was putting those bricks there, somebody that was putting that mortar, had to imagine one day that there would be an African-American individual that would serve as the president of the United States and live in this house that was built by slaves. So that's a little history that we have there. The final piece I want to talk about, and then I'll talk about 12th Street Heritage Development Corporation, which I'm the president and CEO of. And then I'll talk about Morel Homes because they're starting a new history in Kansas City as well. So I want to talk about one of the most famous women that Kansas City had. And there was a lady by the name of Sarah Rector. Sarah Rector was born in the early 1900s. A lot of times back in those days, they didn't keep great histories or great records. Most of the records that they kept in Bibles. A lot of times homes were burnt down, and so they lose the history of individuals, their date of birth. But Sarah Rector was born in Oklahoma. Sarah Rector became part of the Indian Nation. They were given properties and land. As a result, the land that her family was given, there was oil that was found on that property. Sarah Rector was, I think, around 8 years old when she started to inherit the property. By 12 years old, Sarah Rector was a millionaire. She was earning $1 million a year in oil. And for those who don't know what $1 million was back in those days, it was equivalent to, at that point, she was bringing in around $11 million a year. She was perhaps the most wealthy woman in the country, maybe one of the most wealthy women in the world. And she was an African-American lady. She lived in Oklahoma until she moved here into the Kansas City area around the time she was 18. She purchased and built a home, and we call it the Sarah Rector Mansion. My office used to be in that building for a number of years, and that address was 2000 East 12th Street, right there on 12th Street between Michigan and Brooklyn. Sarah Rector was one of the most wealthy women in the world. She moved to Kansas City. She was an entrepreneur. She married a Kansas Cityan here, and she went on for a number of years to invest stock markets, to invest in other areas here in Kansas City. I know a lot of times when we think about Black history, we hear the name. Every year, someone from the news station wants to come out, interview us, and talk about Sarah Rector and the Rector Mansion. I want you guys to know that it is probably, at that time when it was built, it was probably one of the most beautiful pieces of property in Kansas City. It's still a beautiful building, but over the years, it's been weathered, it's been worn, and it's been vacated. Well, I want you guys to know that the Sarah Rector Mansion right now is under construction, and that mansion will be brought back to, hopefully back to its historical piece, back to its original site. So I give Dietrich Anderson a lot of credit for seeing that area and wanting to redo that mansion again. But what a mansion, and what did she bring to Kansas City? She was the first African-American female millionaire in Kansas City, and she was probably one of the richest women in the world. They called her the African-American princess and the Black oil princess, because at that point, no other Black woman was bringing in that type of money from some land that was given to her by her family, and they found oil on. So just a little thing about Sarah Rector, despite all the barriers that she crossed, and she did die later, but she was a famous woman all throughout the world, and everyone knew of this little Black girl they called the Black oil princess. Her name is Sarah Rector. I want you guys to remember that name. I want you guys to, if you get a chance and you're ever in Kansas City, I want you to drive by that area to see the Sarah Rector Mansion, because it was a house that kings and queens, anybody who came to Kansas City, they went to that property to be with Sarah Rector, because everybody knew or heard of the Black oil princess, and they wanted to be around her. So remember that name, Sarah Rector. What a fascinating name and a fascinating individual here in Kansas City. So I'm hoping we're sharing just a little bit of Black history from our perspective in Kansas City. Many people will say, well, you left out a number of things in Kansas City, Black history, rightfully so. That's the reason why I said Black history is not just 28 days out of a month. Black history is 365 days out of a year. Every year you can find something different and something special about Black history in Kansas City. So I'm going to go on and talk a little bit about now something that I know a tremendous amount about, and that's 12th Street Heritage Development Corporation. You heard me mention the name Ollie Gates earlier. Well, Ollie Gates and a gentleman by the name of Bishop James Tyndall had a vision to start a community development corporation, a CDC, and it was called 12th Street Heritage Development Corporation, rightfully so, because it's on 12th Street. And so as a result of them, Ollie Gates got behind this ideal of helping to get this started, generated revenue to help get it started. So back in 1984, the charter was signed for 12th Street Heritage Development Corporation to become a CDC in Kansas City to develop in the 12th Street District and to develop on the east side of Kansas City. Many of you don't know, but if you had an opportunity to see what the 18th area looked like, 12th Street area looked like before Ollie Gates and before 12th Street, there was a lot of clubs, a lot of illicit things taking place in that area. As a result of that, the development company was chartered to clear all that out, along with Ollie Gates, and try to get that area cleaned up. And that's something that they did. Once again, our company started in 1984. As a result of that, we've done, multiple homes, families, bought property, bought land to develop. 100+ homes have been created and developed. Apartments have been created and developed in that area. All under the name of 12th Street Heritage Development Company Corporation and OG Investment, Ollie Gates. The history about 12th Street and history about our organization is that, like every other organization, we've had some transitional periods of time when the market collapsed in 2009, between 2007. Most of the CDCs had collapsed because of a lack of house purchasing and a lot of being able to sell houses and develop. We fell under the same sites, but yet and still, we were the only Black CDC who did not close in 2000 and 2009. Many of them at some point closed because they did not have other revenue streams. When I took over the company, I recognized that and I took over in 2009. I recognized that we had so many children in that area because we have a lot of the housing authorities in that area. And so we decided to start a mentoring program where we mentor young people. Coming from a background, I served as vice president for Boys and Girls Clubs. And so what we did is we decided to start a mentoring program, which we had hundreds and hundreds and thousands of kids going through our mentoring program because we've started mentoring programs in the housing authorities properties, but also in the school systems. Drove another revenue stream to the organization. One day I was sitting in church and I seen a young man crying, and I asked him, I said, "Why are you crying?" He said, I don't have a job. And if I don't have a job, I go back to prison, and I don't want to go back to prison. So I shared with the young man, I said, "Well, don't do what you did the first time to go back to go to prison." He shared with me that that was part of his being released on parole, is that he had to have a job. If he didn't have a job, he would go back to prison. And so I said, "Okay, well, have a nice day." And I remember my wife saying something to me, and she said, "You help people get jobs all over the country. You won't help somebody at your own church?" And I remember we had been discussing in a group called the Urban Summit. We had been discussing this thing called recidivism. And where do our people of color go to when they come out of prison? And where do people just go to, period, to get work and get jobs? As a result of that, I sat down with Bishop Tendon. We had some conversations. And I remember one night I set up and I started writing a program for reentry recidivism. Didn't know anything about it, but something was in my spirit saying, "You need to write this." So we wrote this grant and we wrote this request to start a program for reentry. That reentry program started back in 2011. And that reentry program is still going very, very strong today. We've hired 350+ men and women over the last 11, 12 years to be part of our reentry group, who've gone on to have multiple jobs in different places. And in development, we use this word called but for that program, many of these men and women would have probably either ended up back in prison or other places, because at that point in time, they had nowhere else to go. They had no sources of income. And it's been something that we take credit for, something that we're glad that we had the fortitude to sit down and create that program, because it's changed the lives of so many men and women throughout our community. We then started back to our program called Black History. We started back to our roots. And that was in the development business. And so we're back in developing now. We started a few years ago, back in development. One of the guys I seen on the phone, his father's one of my development partners, and his name is Bill Caden. And Bill helped me. We designed and we created the first development project that was done in KCK in 50+ years. We did it. and we call it the Bernard Villas. It's right at 35th and 36th in Garfield. What a wonderful design building that we had an opportunity to do. We had an opportunity to do a lot of affordable housing in that area, and we gave people affordable housing. Most of those individuals are paying somewhere between $400 and $600 a month for rent. That's what we call giving back to a community. We live by a model, too much is given, much is required here at 12th Street. Right now, just a little history about what we're doing. We have an opportunity, we have projects that are on the table that we're looking at to a tune of probably $750 million that we're looking at. We won't get all those projects, but some of them we'll get. But we did just complete a project, which probably one of the most difficult projects that we've ever done. And I dare to say probably one of the most difficult projects that any developer would do. And that's a project called Jazz Hills. Jazz Hills sits between 9th and 13th and Paseo on the west side. 11 buildings that were vacant. We had one building that we had residents in, but the other buildings had been vacant for quite some time. It is a historical buildings. Those buildings were created back in 1906 through 1912. The colonnades, they were, and for many who don't know, Paseo is a boulevard. Paseo was our first boulevard. It was one of the most grand boulevards that you could go down. These colonnades and these apartment buildings were fabulous when they were created. But once we said that was back in 1906, 1912, those buildings had become dilapidated. Those buildings had become a hazard in the community, had become abandoned, and all kind of illicit activities were taking place in those buildings. So a number of years ago, I got a chance when I first came to 12th Street, we had an opportunity to buy those buildings. And we were not in the financial situation to purchase those buildings at that time. But when I thought about development, those buildings were always in the back of my mind. And I knew at some point I would get a chance to develop those buildings because that was the vision that brought me there some almost 14 years ago to look at those buildings. And I came there and I was under the impression that someday I'd get a chance to do something tremendous for this community that I serve. 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, we got back introduced into those buildings to look at some home ownership and to purchase those buildings with one of the most incredible partnerships that I think anybody can have, and that's Flaherty and Collins out at Indianapolis. We become partners on development. And if you don't know the company, please look up the company. It's called Flaherty and Collins. They're in Indianapolis. David Flaherty is the owner of Flaherty and Collins. He has become our development partner here in this community. We had a chance to purchase these buildings. We purchased the buildings with a grant from one of the community, our neighborhood preservations that they have, and it's called CDC. And what we did is a taxation that the citizens of Kansas City decided that they wanted to do some work on the east side. As a result of that, we were granted $4 million to purchase those buildings. We purchased those buildings about 18 to 24 months ago. As a result of that, we just did a groundbreaking ceremony on those buildings the other day. The buildings are under construction to a tune of $35 million to restore those buildings back to its natural form. There's 197 units of affordable housing that's going to go back into the city, where 197 families will have affordable housing where they can live at. I think that's perhaps, if I wanted to say a legacy that I would leave, I would say that would be it for Kansas City, because I truly believe in affordable housing. I believe in giving back to this city who has done so much for me. I've had a chance to travel all over the world. I've had a chance to do things from receiving the key to the city. I've had a chance to do so many different things, and it's all because of this wonderful city, Kansas City, that I call my home. I love this city. There's so much passion that I have for this city. And you know, this city is one of the most incredible cities. We call it the city of fountains, but I also call it the city of love, because I know we talk about, you know, high crime rates and things like that, but there's so much more positive and so much better things that are happening in Kansas City than the negative pieces. So within the next 14 to 16 months, we're going to get back 197 units. Plus, we're going to restore these Jazz Hill apartments back to its natural form, where you can sit out on the balconies and look at and be at colonnades again and look out on the Paseo Boulevard and look at all the great work that's being done down Paseo. If you haven't driven down Paseo lately, I encourage you to drive down Paseo. What a beautiful boulevard. It can be so much greater if we just put just a little bit more emphasis. And that's what 12th Street Heritage Development Corporation is doing. We're putting on the emphasis on the boulevard, putting the emphasis on the east side of Kansas City, doing our development. We do mixed use development. We do market rate development, but our major emphasis is going to be on affordable housing. There is so much need in Kansas City, somewhere to the tune, some people say between 8,000 and 10,000 units are needed of affordable housing in Kansas City. We can't do it all, but we're not asked to do it all. I've been asked to deliver 1,000 units of affordable housing in Kansas City by our city manager, Brian Platt. And that's what we intend to do, to deliver 1,000 units of affordable housing. So when you think about history, there's some things that I want to leave behind. And that's the history of what 12th Street Heritage Development Corporation is doing in our community, what those individuals like the Ollie Gates, the Emmanuel Cleavers, the Bob Kendricks, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, there's so much history that's rich here in Kansas City. The Horace Petersons, individuals like that who have left their mark on Kansas City. There's a song that's called "I Was Here." And to me, leaving those footprints in the sand says that I was here. And that's what we intend to do, is to make our mark in Kansas City. I think no individual should ever leave this planet and not make a difference in somebody's life, whether it's in Kansas City or whoever's life you come in contact with. So every day we try to make sure that we leave our mark on somebody's life that comes through Kansas City. There's one last group that I want to talk about, and I was hoping that she was going to be here. It's called Morel Homes. I'm actually sitting here in her office right now. What an incredible individual. Her name is Shauna Morel. She is the owner of Morel Homes, and it's an all African-American female group that's doing real estate and development here in Kansas City. I am so proud of this organization and for what they do. And so I wanted to make sure that we talk about not only the past African-American history, but the African-American history that's in the present, and that someday individuals will be giving this speech talking about this organization called Morel Homes. I know Shauna's not here right now, but I am going to ask Brandy if she just come over just quickly, because she's part of Morel Homes. And obviously, there's a few other ladies that are part of Morel Homes as well. So, Brandy, would you just say hello on behalf of Morel Homes and behalf of Shauna, and just say thank you. They're doing tremendous work here in the African-American community, but all over. So if anyone's looking at purchasing a house, this would be the group that I would recommend that you get in touch with, Morel Homes. They are a tremendous African-American group that's realtors in Kansas City. I always like to shine the spotlight on our young, upcoming, future Hall of Famers that I call in Kansas City. So thank you so much, Brandy. I think we'll go into now the Q&A session. I hope it's been something that we've been able to deliver. I'll meet your expectations. I'm not sure. I'm one of those speakers who I love to be in front of people. I love to walk and I talk. I'm just that type of speaker. So I hope I did not bore you guys. I hope you had an opportunity to get some concept of what Kansas City is. I do want to tell you this. We will be holding the NFL draft here this year. Kansas City, the history of Kansas City is so rich. We have one of the biggest things that's happening in Kansas City taking place February the 28th. Our new KCI airport opens up. I'm hoping that you guys will jump on planes and fly out the new airport. It is fabulous. It is a beautiful airport. We do have the NFL draft. We have the World Cup coming to Kansas City. Kansas City is an exciting time to be in Kansas City. It's a great place to be at. I tell you guys, please visit Kansas City. Please stop in the 18th and Vine District, have lunch, have something to drink. Go to the American Jazz Museum, go to the Black Archives, go to the Negro Leagues Baseball. And at this point right now, I'm going to stop. And if there's any questions, I'll take Q&As. I'll take any questions that you may have at this point. Thank you so much for allowing me just to tell you a little bit about Black history in Kansas City and be your guest speaker for today. I really appreciate it. I'm humbled and I'm honored by this opportunity.
Well, Dwayne, I'll start with questions. How did you do that in one breath?
You know what? I get a chance to speak a lot. I just finished speaking. I serve on an international board called the Edgar Snow Memorial Foundation, where I serve as the chair. It's an international board between United States and China. I was just the guest speaker for that for New Year, Chinese New Year. So I'm getting a chance to learn how to breathe in between conversational pieces and keep a smile on your face while you're breathing at the same time.
Well, a lot of great information, especially as like you, I love Kansas City and love to hear the history of it. And as a federal government, we've made a lot of the city ourselves. We're proud that we lost Horace early in his life, but we're happy to have Barbara as a federal employee for many years. She was the lead attorney for EPA for many years until her retirement just a few years ago. And what a wonderful person. And, if you've not been down to the Black Archives, yes, it's a wonderful, wonderful building. It's right there at 18th and Vine. So you can make a day of it right in that area. So we'll open up for any questions. You can come off mute or put them in in the chat box.
Hey, Dwayne, this is Josh. My dad wouldn't let me get out of here without saying hi to you. Great presentation. And we just consider you a family friend. Looking forward to when you're going to come out to the ranch fishing again. Just want to say hi. Great job. Good to see you.
Josh, I'm more than a family friend. I'm family. Your father and your mother are so important to me. Had not been for your father, I would not be back in this development business. So I pay homage to you, your father, Bill, your mom, Peggy. I mean, you guys are just terrific individuals. And I thank you so much for sharing your father with me for so much time. So thank you so much, Josh.
Absolutely. We love you, brother.
Thank you as well, man. Same feelings. Love you too. Oh, this is your time. Ask me whatever you want to ask me. It doesn't necessarily have to be about, it can be about anything. I mean, I'm scheduled to be here with you for another 10, 12 minutes. So there's nothing off the table. You can ask me what you want to ask me.
Okay, there is a question as far as how much do you know about Nelson Fuzzy Thompson?
You know what? He was one of my heroes. Most people know him from the Missouri side, but I knew him from the Kansas side. As a little kid growing up in KCK, and I'll share this, not to move from that, but I'll share this. I would have never, ever thought, and I'll say this, I am the most grateful, most appreciative, not just Black man, but man that's ever walked this earth. Growing up as a young Black kid in KCK off the Quindale area, I would have never dreamed, and I never would have thought that my life would take this path. And I've traveled all over the world. I've met people all over the world. And I'll say this, Fuzzy Thompson, I knew him when we were kids, when I was a kid. He helped shape and mold me. He helped shape and mold some of my character. Most people know him from SCLC and some other areas, other places. But I knew him from the little recreation places and things like that. He helped us with when we were kids. So yes, he's one of my heroes. I know a little bit about him. I knew him quite well. I visited him when he was sick. I visited him before he passed. And Kansas City, Missouri lost a tremendous individual when God called him home. So he will forever be a tremendous person in my life. And I'm thankful that I came up under individuals like Fuzzy. I thought I saw something else maybe in the chat. Was there anything else in the chat?
I think there was a question about the Quindaro area and the ruins there.
Absolutely. We're looking at with Senator Haley right now. We've been having a lot of conversations about the Underground Railroad, the Quindaro ruins off of 18th Street and off of 27th Street and other areas off there, off of Brown and everything else. So we've been looking at those areas over there to do some development. I know the mayor and some of the other ones in KCK are looking at what could be on that site. Our development team it's been kind of looking at that. We know that it's going to take something very unique to be over there. What that's going to be, I'm not sure. Some people are asking for a hotel. Some people are asking for a restaurant. We have to be able to have traffic counts over there and be able to drive traffic over there. But I do foresee that area at some point being a landmark for Kansas City, Kansas. I do believe it's an opportunity to do something great over there. And I do hope that before I leave this earth, I'll get a chance to help be a part of something, to be able to complete and do something in that area over there. So I look forward to it. I drive by there quite frequently. There's been times that I sat there and just kind of looked at the John Brown's statue there and just kind of sit there and try to visualize what could be on this piece of property where the hospital used to be at, where African-American people were born, things like that. So I'm still going through my mind trying to figure out what that would be. But I do believe this, before I leave this earth, we will do something on that piece of property over there. Somebody says a nightclub should be, we're taking some leadership and the guidance from Senator David Haley and from the city as to what they would like to have there, but also the city has to be willing to, we do mostly public-private partnerships in our development. So the city is going to have to want to undertake some of that as well. And so, but we're definitely interested in putting whatever makes sense there, whatever can drive traffic count and put fruit count, rooftops, things like that. So I would love to see something built there that has a rooftop on it where people can look out and see the river and get a chance to sit there and just visualize what so many slaves that crossed over out of Missouri did to get across to the other side that was considered to be free state. Missouri, I believe, was the 18th state to abolish slavery. But we know even when that happened, it still wasn't, it was something that wasn't paid attention to, let's say it like that. It was business as usual. There was a document signed, but there was nothing behind the document. As a result of that, we still had slaves in Missouri. And Kansas was known as a free state. So many individuals, as many individuals crossed that river, there were so many of them who did not make it. And I believe that stand itself is a tribute to how much people just wanted to be free. And, today, many of us can't even fathom the ideal of slaves. But I've been to so many slave quarters. I've been to so many places that held slaves. There's some great places in New Orleans. If you haven't had a chance, go to the African American Museum in DC. And if there was ever anything that would break your heart, I ask myself sometimes, how can humans be so cruel to other humans? Estimated 100 million African Americans were taken out of Africa during slavery to bring to America. It's also estimated 10 million of those slaves never made it to the Caribbean, never made it to America. So that means somewhere along the Atlantic coast, along that area up there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, or millions of slaves died in that transport between Africa and the United States. I ask myself the question all the time. How can we be so inhumane? How can humans be so cruel to other individuals? I think whatever the city decides they want to do over there, we will help support if it makes sense financially.
Great. There's another question. Is there anything new coming to the Jazz District?
There is. Actually, there's a plan right now the congressman has. There's a new development being done in 19th and Vine right now. Going to be a mixed use with a market rate and with some affordable and I'm not sure what to be restaurants or hotels or stores that'll be on the bottom of it, but there's a new project being done right now. We're looking at a multitude of projects that are in the 18th and Vine district right now. I know the congressman would like to see the whole area redone. I know he's working on a development plan right now for 18th and Vine, and we sure are interested in being a part of that. There's another area right down the street from that, Parade Park, that needs attention. We're going to be looking at that as well, trying to draw some attention to that and trying to see if there's a development opportunity for our country, for our company, Flaherty and Collins and 12th Street as well. There's a lot of work that has to be done in that area. I think they need an anchor tenant that's going to be there that people recognize throughout the country. We need to have a breakfast restaurant there so people that are traveling across the country, I stopped in there early in the mornings, can have breakfast in the 18th Divine District, check out the museums, things like that. So there's a lot of things that are on the horizon for the 18th Divine area. It just doesn't stop at 18th Divine. It starts at 12th Street and works its way down. So it's a community that right now is on the upside, so I look forward to seeing what's going to happen down there. There's much conversation about, downtown area, new baseball stadium, things like that. So, the whole area down there is getting a facelift, and I look forward to seeing what's going to take place next.
Okay, great. Last call for questions.
Well, I would say this, guys, this is, in my professional career, this is one of those highlights for me. My friend, I seen him on here earlier, Clarence Small, but other individuals, it's been a highlight. Larry, thank you for, bearing with my schedule. Sometimes my schedule is horrific, but you kind of stuck in there with me and we kind of got this done. So I want to thank you for your leadership of getting this done. Guys, it's truly an honor. It's been my pleasure to be able to stand in front of you guys or sit in front of you guys. And just in my limited view and what I know, to talk a little bit about this thing that we call African-American history. I'll say this again. African-American history is not just African-American history, it's American history. It should be history that we should think about 365 days out of the year, and even on leap year, 366 days. So please remember that when you think about African-American history or Black American history, it's not Black or African. This is, woven in the fabric of this thing we call United States. It's American history. Let's remove the Blackness from it and say, that's some great American history. Guys, I salute you guys. I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of your day today. And once again, I pay homage and honor to you guys for allowing me to be your guest speaker. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dwayne, so much. And lots of great comments coming over to you. So great blessings. So again, thank you for being here. For our members, keep in mind next month on March 2nd, we'll be celebrating Women's History Month. But before that time, the end of this month is the Blacks in Government Conference that will be at the Kauffman Foundation. So again, look at that website and consider going to the big conference this year.
Is it possible I can get a copy of this?
Yes, sir. Yeah, as soon as we upload it to YouTube, we'll share the copy with you.
Thank you guys so much. It's been my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you.
Everyone have a wonderful rest of the day and even a better weekend.